It's really wonderful to have several new people here tonight. It's lovely. We have been looking at similes of the Buddha. The Buddha gives so many similes in his teachings, over 500. And simile, metaphor, allegory, this is a wonderful, wonderful teaching technique that the Buddha was truly a master at, and often would draw from nature and just the real world around people. And this is very powerful for spiritual truths, to use physical correlates, to bring to life and bring home spiritual truths. And tonight we're going to look at a sutta that's a discourse, like a sermon of the Buddha, and it's in one of the collections, the connected collections in Pali, which is a language related to Sanskrit, that in Theravada Buddhism all of the texts are written down in Pali, and it's called the Pali Canon. And so in Pali it's called the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's just a collection of the Buddha's teachings. That the organizing principle for this particular collection is theme. So they're all of a similar theme. And we're looking at the beginning of this collection of discourses where the Buddha is having conversations with, that's not going to work, devas. And a deva is sort of like an angel. So something's not working.
Yes,
Let me try
here.
this.
Move it up towards there.
Anyway, let me try again. Where would it be? Is it here? Yeah, that's it. Okay, great. So here we go. And this particular simile, the Buddha gives a specific definition to each aspect of the simile. Some of the similes are quite general and just sort of drive home a principle. But this particular sutta, like some of them, each aspect of the simile has a parallel in the teachings. And so it starts with a deva coming to the Buddha, this angel coming to the Buddha with this query, with this conundrum. And he's talking about his experience, that it's resounding with a group of nymphs, but haunted by a gang of goblins. This grove is called delusion. How does one escape from it? So even though this being is in a realm that's considered higher than the human realm, it still has many of the same aspects as our lives. That there's some really good things that seem to be kind of enticing and pulling me off of my spiritual practice, and then there's some sort of haunting things that are difficult, that are also causing me problems. And this whole problem is delusion, and what do I do about it? How do I escape? So now the Buddha has this beautiful simile where he's comparing spiritual practice, the spiritual life, to a chariot. And he starts off by saying that path that will help you escape, that path that will answer your dilemma and take you away from delusion, is called the straight way. And it's beautiful. The Buddha in many places talks about the fact that in his teachings there's nothing held back. He actually uses another simile of a closed fist. There's no closed fist. There's no inner circle. There's nothing hidden. He's laid it all out and tells us everything that we need to know for our own well-being, for our own happiness, for our own development in our spiritual lives. It's called the straight way. There's nothing esoteric. It's all exoteric, the teachings. And it's headed for the place called fearless. Again, this beautiful image that we're on a path and it's straight and straightforward and clear, and it's headed for this beautiful destination of fearless. And there's many layers, many levels of this fearlessness that the Buddha is pointing us to. And the first level is just living a life that's more conscious, more thought through, less just being jerked around by our own impulses and our own stupidity, and what's popular and what's on TV and what's on advertising. To start to live a more thought through, deliberate. Isn't there an expression? If someone could mute themselves, isn't there an expression somewhere about a life, an unexamined life is not worth living? We want to examine our lives. And when you start to take up a meditation practice, when you start to come in contact with wisdom teachings, and with some companions on the path, and some models and some friends. Is there a way to mute everybody? There is. I just don't know it. Anyway, if everyone could mute. So you start to live more ethically, more morally. And this is the first level of fearlessness, that you start to live a life that has no regrets, or much fewer regrets.
Here, let me.
So if someone can mute themselves, if everybody online could mute themselves.
Oh, stand, please, stand. Do not.
Nida, and she doesn't know. If you press the three little dots on the top, you can hear her.
Yeah. Hold on. Hold on. Jasmine, stop, please.
With somebody else. Yeah, here. Maybe that's going to work. No, maybe not.
And
So sorry.
All of these people are muted, so
I
click
know,
the
but-
little green thing and we'll get more people.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
She's muted.
Okay. All right. Let's just. So you start to have fewer and fewer regrets, and in terms of living a more moral life, a more thought through life, a more examined life, the Buddha says when we are living morally, and the Buddha is clear about the foundation for morality, that it's very straightforward and simple. And it's very pragmatic. The Buddha is very, very pragmatic, and it's basically that I have this body, and I have this mind, I have this heart, I have this life, I have this life energy, and I want it to go well. I mean, I want not a lot of harm to come to it. And just like that's what I wish for myself, therefore for you as well, that you also have a body and a heart and a mind and a life, and so I don't want to be harming you. It's very, very logical and very straightforward, and bypasses a lot of philosophical debate about, well, what's moral, what's right, what's wrong. Just look at your own wishes for yourself, and then you wish that for others, for everybody. And when we start to live morally, the Buddha says that we actually give a gift of fearlessness to others, because we begin to become a person who's reliable and honest and transparent. And this is a gift. Certainly is a gift in our friendships. We all know that. We all know our friends that we can trust. Our friends that, if they say they're going to be there, they'll be there. And we all know some of our friends that is not for sure that they'll be there. We all know those people as well. So it's a path, and it's called the straight way, and it's headed for the place called fearless. And now we get to the chariot. And this chariot that we get to, this vehicle that we get to climb into and sort of build and ride in. This chariot is called unrattling. It's a bit of a play, Most of us haven't had a lot of exposure to chariots. I did this cross-country road trip with my son just a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we were outside of Brandon, and we saw maybe a dozen chariots on the shoulder of the highway coming towards us. Amish. I've never seen that. They were dressed. It was like something from the 1800s. But typically chariots rattle a lot. They're not a smooth ride, and so the Buddha's doing a play on words here, that this chariot is called unrattling. It's this particular chariot, the chariot of the Buddha's of the Buddha's teachings and the Buddhist path, is smooth and clear sailing, and it's fitted with wheels of wholesome states. And this is such a beautiful image, that what really gathers momentum and what really allows you to make progress on the spiritual path is wholesome states. This is sort of the litmus test. Again, the Buddha is so pragmatic and practical. So it's not mystical and mysterious. There's passages where the Buddha is basically saying, many times he says this, if whatever you're doing, if you've taken up, yoga practice and a chanting practice and a bowing practice and a meditation practice and a reading inspiring literature practice, if you're doing these things to nourish your inner life, and if wholesome states are increasing and unwholesome states are decreasing, then the Buddha says, keep doing it. Good. This is how we know that the practices that we're doing are working. They're benefiting us. If wholesome states are increasing and unwholesome states are decreasing. And most people that begin to meditate will experience this quite quickly, quite early on. They'll realize that, oh my gosh, I just don't feel, I didn't snap back at that person, and they just start to realize, I've got some more inner resources. I have some more patience. It's easier for me to see things from other people's perspective, etc., etc., etc. All of these increase of wholesome states and decrease of unwholesome states. And then it says that conscience is its bench back. In this chariot, you get into this chariot and there's a seat, and the bench back, the back of the seat, is our conscience. And this word in the Pali language is the word hiri. And I've I've heard many people say, and I've said it myself, that whenever there's this Pali word of hiri, there's also this other, it's pair, this other Pali word, otapa. And, but actually here, it's the only time I know in the suttas so far that I know of, where hiri, conscience, is appearing on its own. So I just want to clarify, because I've said on tape here that that doesn't happen, and it turns out it does. It's right here. Hiri appears on its own. Conscience is its bench back. And this conscience is the Buddha says that our conscience is basically what makes us and keeps us decent human beings. And that Hiri and its partner Otapa are the guardians. They're the guardians of the world. And we know this. We know that we need friends that have tender consciences and that are responding to their consciences. We need political leaders. We need teachers. We know this. It's very important, and it's very important for us to keep our conscience tender and soft. And the way to do that is to be responding to it, listening to it, and acting from it. A good friend of mine, a practitioner, we were together about a week ago, and she said something, and I was super impressed with what she said. And then I got a text the next day of like clarifying, I just want to clarify, like, because it wasn't the whole picture, and it was more impressive what she said than it was after she clarified. And we do this. I do this. I do this all the time. And I do the practice that she does of, something comes out of your mouth. And often as it's coming out of your mouth, you realize, wait, that's not the whole picture. That's not everything. That's misleading. That makes me sound more impressive than I really am. Or, sometimes I'll find myself doing it when I'm telling a story, and then I realize, oh, I exaggerated that because it's funnier, but it comes at a price, and it's a beautiful practice, because it then, it's really onerous. Actually, Sanghamitta, when I said blah blah blah, it wasn't actually the whole picture, but when you do that practice, it really quickly gets to where you're doing it very, very much less, misleading people or exaggerating. It's a very, very useful practice and helpful for our relationship with our conscience and keeping our conscience tender. And then the Buddha goes on and says, mindfulness, its upholstery. This particular sutta really is just covering our spiritual practice. Everything's here. So mindfulness is its upholstery. And mindfulness has a huge role to play in our spiritual practice. Huge. And it's the upholstery. It's ubiquitous. It's like covering. It's covering so many things, and you can expand this. Upholstery often makes things beautiful, and when things are upholstered, they're often more comfortable. And mindfulness is its upholstery. And Ajahn Brahm has a very wonderful definition of mindfulness, keeping it simple. Mindfulness, he breaks it down to these two components which cover really the essence. The word mindfulness, the English translation is of this Pali word sati, and early on translations of sati or sometimes recollectedness, which is also a pretty good translation. So sati, this Pali word, kind of has two aspects to it. And one is probably the one that we're the most familiar with, which is this idea of being present, being aware of what's happening, being mindful. But the other part of it is memory, and that the recollectedness translation really captures that part of mindfulness, this memory part, that we're remembering what would be good to do. We're remembering the teachings. So Ajahn Brahm, he says a wonderful way to think of mindfulness is what am I doing? You know, that's the presence part. What's happening? What's going on? What's going on with me inside and outside? What am I doing? And then what would be beneficial to be doing? So sometimes, yeah, you don't want to be mindful. Oh, chips. Yeah, I'm eating chips. Yeah, I'm clearly eating chips. Yeah, I'm very aware. Every single chip. Yep. I'm eating the chips. You know, this is only part of mindfulness. What would be good to be doing? Stop eating the chips would be really good to be doing. Yeah. And it's true. Like, you know, mindfulness has been appropriated, really taken from the Buddha's teachings and appropriated. And, you know, we have some mindfulness training. I know of hotshot corporate lawyers in Toronto, you know, getting mindfulness training. Why? So that they can make more money, you know, so they can be more productive. This is only one part of mindfulness, the presence part, and we want the other part too, like what would be good to be doing. And then the zinger of this whole sutta is where the Buddha says, I say the teaching is the driver. And this is really the thing that makes the Buddha's teachings so profound and so very unique. The teaching of non-self, that there is not this eternal, permanent, unchanging agent, you know, little homunculus living inside of me. You know, there just isn't. And the Buddha says that this will become clear to us if we take up the teachings and really investigate our own experience, that we'll see this directly. And so what is driving this vehicle? It's not little me, it's the teaching. And this drives home what the Buddha says is going on. I mean, you know, this idea of non-self. I mean, there is this body here, and if this leg gets broken, you don't hurt, you know. I mean, there is, it's not no self, it's non-self. It's ourselves are not what we take ourselves to be. And so what is going on is just this constant arising and passing away of phenomena, this continuous arising and passing away of different causes and conditions, and one thing leading to the other, leading to the other, leading to the other. So it's just this constant change. And because it's happening so fast, like so fast, we experience this continuity. But when the mind gets very still and the mindfulness gets very powerful and penetrative, you see this arising, passing away, arising, passing away, arising, passing away, arising, passing away. It's like pixels. we have all this technology early films, it wasn't quite so smooth. It was clear, just frame, and that's what's going on. Causes and conditions, causes and conditions, causes and conditions. And that's why the Buddha is saying that the teaching is the driver. There's this principle that is why the whole path works, why it does lead to escape, and that is that when we get exposed to the teachings and start to learn the teachings, this is changing the input. This is changing the causes and the conditions of what is arising and passing away. And this is the secret. And there's this process that happens when you begin your spiritual practice. And the Buddha is very clear. Initially, you get exposed to the teachings, and this already starts the whole process happening. And then you learn the teachings, and you come to understand them at a certain level. And then you begin to practice, and then you begin to experience them at a deeper level. And the whole process just unfolds. And the teaching is what's driving it. So it's like when we expose ourselves to these beautiful, clear, wholesome instructions and wholesome teachings, we're changing the causes and conditions in our lives. We're changing the environment, and then what is growing and what is arising and passing away follows suit, changes accordingly. And so the more that you expose yourself to the teachings, the more that you practice them, what you're doing is sort of changing the probability that the next time that you're in a certain environment, in a certain setting, the more that you've practiced, the more that you've exposed yourself to the teachings, the probability that a wholesome response will arise has increased greatly. That's how it works. It's so wonderful. With the right view running out in front, because right view is the start of the Eightfold Noble Path. It's also the end of the Eightfold Noble Path. But you need to have enough right view to start thinking that it's worth your time, and it's worth your energy to meditate, to listen to Dhamma teachings, to associate with other practitioners. And right view running out in front. If I am suffering, if I am caught in an unwholesome thought pattern, in an unwholesome mind state, this is wonderful shorthand for you in your practice. If that's happening, I definitely don't have right view in that moment. So when I'm suffering, I realize, there's like delusion is leading here. Delusion is running out in front, not right view. And this is a wonderful time to, you could listen to a Dhamma talk, you could call up a friend that's also a practitioner, and that's usually what I do. I usually go to I'll even just point blank say to Sanghamita, I'm in a funk, I'm not, talk to me here, talk to me, help me out, and very quickly she does. And I start to see things from a different perspective, and usually a much more expansive perspective that it starts to open up, and get more spacious. And invariably unwholesome mind states have they have a heaviness to them, and a contracted and a smallness and a kind of thing, And then when you start to access some right view, it's just like, and there's, often that doesn't actually go away. It just gets a lot of room, and so it can sort of, it's like opening the window, and then that smell goes away. Yeah. So the end of this sutta it's precious because it's not in the suttas as much as maybe we wish that it was. And that is that it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, because it just doesn't. One who has such a vehicle, and we all do, we've all begun to be interested in spiritual practice. We've all begun to hear the Buddha's teachings. One who has such a vehicle, whether a woman or a man, has, by means of this vehicle, the teacher is the driver, drawn close to the escape, drawn close to Nibbana. So that's good news. One who has such a vehicle, whether a woman or a man, has by means of this vehicle drawn close to Nibbana. So we're all of us in our own way, drawing closer and closer to Nibbana. And may we be encouraged to get those wheels rolling with those wholesome states and get momentum in our spiritual practice. So I'm going to close there and open it up, please, for any questions or examples or discussion of any sort. Please.
Does everybody know what right view is? Sorry, go ahead, Caleb.
You carry on. How do you know, or how do you catch yourself when your view isn't right earlier? Like, how do you get better at stopping that from going on a chaotic course before realizing that I don't have right view?
I think with practice, Caleb, I think at any point, it's like you get these instructions from meditation teachers. If the attention has slid off the meditation object, it kind of doesn't matter. Were you gone for 15 minutes? Were you gone for 4 or 5 seconds? The point is that you realized and that you come back to the meditation object. So I think the more we practice, the more sensitive we get to suffering. The more we realize that, I don't need to be, I don't need to just stay in this negative loop. You become less and less the victim, and more proactive and responsible, and realize, my state of mind, my state of heart isn't because of that person or the weather or my stomach ache. That is what the Buddha is proposing, that we're not victims, that we have choice, way more choice than we realize. Am I answering that question?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what you can do, Caleb, is when you realize, wow, I'm really letting this get to me.
Mm-hmm.
then just try a bunch of different things. I was reading, Bodhipala gave me this great book, You're Not So Smart. And it's all about cognitive biases. And I just lost what I was going to say. Darn. Anyway, I read a really cool cognitive bias. I'm so sorry. Oh. Shoot. Yeah.
Multiple techniques for
Yeah.
catching it early.
Sorry if I. Yeah. It was a zinger. Sorry, Caleb.
Welcome back.
Yeah. Kamal, please.
Oh, thank you. You know, I really, really liked this reading and your explanation of it about the straight way, fearless chariot. And what really got me was the conscience. You know, I left home when I was 19 to go to college. And my father was a great man. And I didn't realize at first till I was in my mid-20s, but my conscience came from my father
Yeah.
and another friend. And when my father passed, and then 20 years later when my friend passed, it didn't bother me that they had in my mind it was they needed to go because it was time. They could not suffer anymore. But I still have them as my conscience. And they provide me with a straight path. And about a few years ago, I lost my path. And thanks to the introduction of Buddhism back into my life, I'm finding it again. And just like the chariot, it's rattling. It's not straight. My back hurts sometimes, figuratively speaking. But I am really blessed to have been introduced to your program. And if you want to blame anybody for it, it's Laurent. So anyway, thank you very, very much for this. I'm going to try and attend as many of these as I can, but I really, really love your explanation of these readings. It was great. It was like, you know, I couldn't move out of my chair because I wanted to sit here and listen to you. And by the way, you have a great presence around you. It is very warm and comforting. So thank you so much for that. With that, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Kamal. Anyone else? No, thanks so much for sharing seriously about your dad. I mean, that's very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And you're right. Like if we have the great fortune of having upright parents, they do instill a conscience in us. It's very, very beautiful. Yeah.
Just a end note, my dad was a Brahmin.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh.
And he could have been a priest if he wanted to, because he knew everything. His Sanskrit was impeccable. But at the same time, he taught me that all religions, everything is the same. We traveled quite a bit together, and we went to churches and mosques and Buddhist temples around India. And he said, we are Hindus, we are Brahmins, but we respect everybody else.
Mhm. Yeah. Very, very beautiful. Karen Armstrong, eh? Do you know this comparative religion? She got a TED fellowship and did a study of, she's done a manifesto of compassion, but she talks about every religion. This is where they really, really all line up. The idea of compassion. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe just a clarification on, so this comes back to our conversations about agency and or the self and discovering that there is a non-self. So the chariot is not the self, it's not that like the teacher is the driver, but the whole essence of the chariot is the self, or
No, the chariot is the vehicle.
okay.
It's the chariot is everything that's listed there, and which are all the aspects of our spiritual practice. The chariot is our spiritual practice.
Okay.
So it's our mindfulness, our conscience, our wholesome mind states, and then the pinnacle is the teachings themselves are driving the whole thing, because it's like there's the expression garbage in, garbage out, and it's the opposite, like beauty in, and then it'll be beauty out. That the teachings have that much power that they start to change the probability of what is going to arise and pass away in our minds, in our mind streams. So the chariot is the vehicle of spiritual practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, there's the wheels and the bench back and the upholstery. That's all part of the teachings and the practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've just an example, like with work, I've noticed I used to be very self-deprecating in my response to mistakes or shaming in myself or others and since really indulging in the practice, I feel like I'm honoring and being honest in conversation without being self-deprecating, and it's been pretty cool to see. Still not perfect, there's lots of work to do, but that backbone or the seat resonated with me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yes, please, Leslie.
Thank you very much for the teaching. I got so much out of that, and it was really, really rewarding to listen to you. Could you go back to the beginning and reread the question that's asked around delusion?
Yeah.
And can you speak a little bit more to delusion?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can talk about delusion. I'm an expert. That I can talk about with total confidence. Yeah. So, yeah, great. So this Deva comes to the Buddha and asks, it's resounding with a group of nymphs, but haunted by a gang of goblins. This grove is called delusion. How does one escape from it? So you really get the two big obstacles and the two really strong forces in the human mind described here. And one is craving, like I want this, I want this, I want this. And the other is aversion. I don't want this. I want something different. I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And this is often where we live our lives, that I'm like, just to get graphic, you wake up in the morning, it's like Monday morning, and there's all this aversion, and then get through the workday, and then, or there's, you know, like a feeling of being put upon or whatever, or the opposite, you know, like woohoo, Monday morning, you know, and you got a lot of craving, or just craving and aversion. And so the Buddha says that there are these three unwholesome roots that really are what's going on in every human mind, unless it comes in contact with wisdom teachings, and unless it starts to do some kinds of practices that train it. And those three unwholesome roots are craving, aversion, and delusion. And the fact is that we can't really see our delusion. I mean, that's sort of inherent in the definition. But the craving and the aversion are manifestations of the delusion. And the big delusion is that you know, there's this permanent me in here, and the me, I will be happy when I get all this stuff. And this is how we live our entire lives. And the stuff that the me has become deluded about is different from everyone, you know, like one person, it's like an incredible amount of experiences and traveling around the world, and someone else, it's like this certain house in this certain location, or this certain you know, whatever. But the delusion is that that's going to work, that that's going to be meaningful and fulfilling. It has aspects of that, of course, but it never, ever delivers what our delusion has convinced us that it will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just this push, pull, push, pull, push, pull. I remember when I first heard that, it was just like, oh my gosh, just described my entire life. It like down to, you know, what I'm wearing and that cup of coffee, that, you know, like big and little, you know. Yeah.
So what are the goblins and the nymphs in there? That's the craving and the aversion?
Yeah, it's
They're
the objects of
Yeah,
the
the
craving and the
objects.
aversion. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the nymphs
Yeah.
are the,
Yeah.
you know, you know, shiny things, and the goblins are the gnarly things. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. One more. Last one.
Would alcoholism be an example of delusion where you crave things and then there's other things you don't want? So then you choose a middle path of delusion with alcoholism, we'll say, which is a temporary respite from craving and delusion. And then am I on track with that?
Yeah, there's so many different ways to think about it, but addiction is really, any addiction is just, I mean, we're all addicted. Like that's basically what the Buddha is saying. He even uses the idea of intoxication. We're all intoxicated with our youth and with our life and our health. And so, yeah, addiction is just, it's a continuum. Yeah. And yes,
Yeah, the Buddha defines, when he talks about craving, he divides craving into three different areas. First is craving for the sensory objects, you know, the beautiful music or the beautiful scenery or whatever. The second is craving for existence. And then the third is craving for non-existence. So that's when you blotto, you know, go blotto with alcohol or drugs. Yeah. Or suicide.
yeah. Yes. All right. We're at time. So I think it's maybe that, but we won't. But we'll try next week. I'll cut it off sooner. And we will. We'll try. I promise. I promise.
I love Mudita.
I promise.
Being happy for the happiness of others.
Yeah, she's so, yeah. she's telling me today some good news in this other person's life. She starts crying. It's so beautiful. Yeah, it's very beautiful to live with. Great. Okay, so we'll do Upeka. Okay, thank you.
Sangamita, can we dedicate to Elaine?
Yes, so we really, one of the ladies who used to come on Zoom all the time, yeah, fell off her bike and got a really bad break. And it turns out there was a tumor in her leg, and that's why it shattered anyway. So she hasn't got the pathology back on it yet, but so we'd like to dedicate the merit of our practice to her, Elaine. Okay, so we usually end with one of the Brahma Viharas. The Brahma Viharas are the beautiful emotions that we want to develop. And one of them is equanimity. And the Pali term for it is upeka. So first of all, bring to mind a neutral person. So this is somebody you don't have strong feelings of love or hate towards, just a neutral feelings, and direct these phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now bring to mind someone who's been very supportive of you and send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depends upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now bring to mind a friend, and if the previous person was a friend, then just bring to mind another friend and send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. And now bring to mind somebody that you're having a very difficult relationship with and send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you too as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. And now we'll send the phrases to ourselves. I am the owner of my karma. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not my wishes or hopes. I care for myself, and I am determined to follow the path of peace, the Noble Eightfold Path. I wish myself happiness, and I am determined to make skillful choices. All beings are the owners of their karma. The happiness and unhappiness of all beings depends upon their actions, not upon my wishes for them. I care for all beings as suffering beings, but I cannot keep them from suffering. I wish all beings true happiness, but I cannot make their choices for them. May the merit of our practice be shared with all sentient beings, named and unnamed. Elaine, Blair, Lisa's family, Russell. May all beings be well and happy.